Doug fumbled with the lock, his hands unsteady as he pushed his way into his apartment. The stale air hit him first, a stark contrast to the scent of Miranda that still clung to his skin. He stood in the dim morning light, disheveled, the events of last night playing in an unrelenting loop in his mind. It had started with fear, shared uncertainty, the weight of something far larger than either of them pressing down. And then, something else. The need for solace, for connection, for a moment where the world's unraveling mystery could be forgotten. He could still feel her warmth, the ghost of her touch. Was it comfort? Desperation? Maybe both. Doug raked his fingers through his hair, exhaling sharply. He needed to focus. This wasn't just about what had happened between them, it was about everything, and right now, everything felt too big to grasp. He slumped onto the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Where did he even start? Greaves. He'd been circling the man for days, but what did he really know about him? He had the air of a scholar but carried himself like a man with secrets. If anyone had answers, it was him. But Doug couldn't shake the feeling that reaching out would mean stepping into something he wasn't ready for. D4DKT9R, the faceless enigma lurking in the digital shadows. Their clues had been breadcrumbs, each leading him deeper into the labyrinth. What did they know that he didn't? What were they waiting for? Pillar 83, the one who started all of this, and then disappeared. Doug had followed every lead, scoured every post, but Pillar 83 had gone dark. Was he hiding? Or had someone, gotten to him first? But the biggest question of all, the one that made his pulse quicken and his breath hitch, who the hell was Ephraim? Doug had always prided himself on seeing the patterns, connecting the dots. But this time, the pieces refused to fit. Ephraim wasn't just a name whispered in conspiracy forums. He wasn't just a theory or a symbol. He was something else entirely. Something real. And Doug had the gnawing suspicion that whatever Ephraim was, he had been watching this unfold far longer than Doug had been playing the game. His head ached. He needed coffee. Something strong. Something to cut through the haze. With a groan, he pushed himself up and shuffled toward the kitchen, his eyes flicking absent-mindedly toward the mail he had tossed on the counter the day before. Junk, mostly. Bills. A folded newspaper. And then, something that made his stomach twist. A single, unmarked envelope. Thick, heavy, like parchment rather than standard paper. Doug hesitated before picking it up, his fingers tracing the edge. No return address. No markings at all. He swallowed hard, tore it open, and pulled out the contents. A single sheet of paper. One line, printed neatly in the center. You are further along than you think. Doug's breath came in shallow gasps as he flipped the paper over. Nothing. Just the words. Just the weight of a message meant for him. And then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed. A text. No name, no number, just 3 words. He's waiting, Doug. His hands trembled as he stared at the screen, at the note, at the pieces falling into place around him. He had been asking all the wrong questions, because Ephraim wasn't just connected to all of this. Ephraim was pulling the strings. Chapter 32. Miranda wished she didn't have to open the store. The thought of leaving the warmth of Doug's arms, the steady rhythm of his breath against her skin, felt almost unbearable. Last night had been an escape, one that neither of them fully understood. It wasn't love, not yet. Maybe not ever. But it had been necessary, an anchor against the rising tide of uncertainty that threatened to consume them both. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, her mind a tangled web of questions, doubts, and the inescapable pull of something ancient. The silent order, Ephraim, the notebook Greaves had given her, it all pointed to something far greater than hidden history. This wasn't about lost civilizations or secret societies. It was about power. True, terrifying power. And if she had learned anything from her studies, power left unchecked always led to catastrophe. Doug stirred beside her, murmuring something unintelligible in his sleep. She turned onto her side, watching him. He looked different now, less sure of himself, but more alive than she'd ever seen him. The weight of the mystery had changed him, drawn him into something vast and unknowable. And yet, she could feel his hesitation, the fear lingering beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, snapping her out of her thoughts. She reached for it, already knowing what it would say before she even looked at the screen. A reminder. The store opened in an hour. Life had to go on, no matter how much the universe threatened to unravel. With a reluctant sigh, she slipped out of bed and into the quiet of the morning. The cold air was a harsh contrast to the warmth of the sheets. She dressed methodically, her mind still caught in the chaos of the night before. What now? Where did they go from here? Were they truly ready for the answers they sought? By the time she reached the bookstore, a heavy unease had settled in her chest. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and inhaled the familiar scent of aged paper and ink. This place had always been her refuge, but today it felt different, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. She set about her usual routine, turning on the lights, brewing a pot of coffee, straightening the displays. Normalcy, routine. But her hands trembled as she worked. Last night had changed something fundamental within her. The knowledge she had sought for so long was finally within reach, but she couldn't shake the feeling that some truths weren't meant to be uncovered. As she ran her fingers along the spines of the books lining the shelves, she felt it again. That pull, that whisper of something just beyond the edge of understanding. A single thought echoed in her mind, relentless and unshakable. She had to trace mankind's origins back to its proper timeline, and she had to do it before it was too late. Chapter 33. Dr. Greaves adjusted his cufflinks as he prepared to leave his modest apartment. The morning light streamed through his blinds in slanted golden bars, illuminating the small desk where he'd spent the last hour replaying last night's recording. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Guilt gnawed at him. His old student deserved better than to be spied on. And yet, the weight of what they were unraveling left him little choice. He had left her a warning, at least. That was something. Not enough to erase his guilt, but something. Miranda had always been brilliant, methodical, relentless in her pursuit of knowledge. He had expected her to eventually stumble upon the Bahama anomaly, the sunken gate, the forgotten gods. It was her nature to seek. But Doug Weapon? That was unexpected. A man with no formal training, no academic framework to guide him, and yet here he was, thriving where scholars had failed. It unsettled him. Doug had found the book. That alone was remarkable. But to have drawn the attention of Pillar 83, D4DKT9R, and, most impossibly, Ephraim, that meant something profound. It meant that this man, this so-called regular guy, was something more. A potential force. A variable Greaves hadn't accounted for. He sighed, slipping on his overcoat. There was no more time for speculation. He had to see Miranda, to gauge where she stood, to understand how Doug fit into all of this. He had hoped to be the one guiding the path forward, but perhaps it was already out of his hands. Dr. Greaves stepped out into the crisp morning air, his mind a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. The weight of his own deception sat heavy in his gut as he adjusted his scarf against the chill. He had spent a lifetime towing the line between secrecy and revelation. But last night, dropping that listening device, it felt like a betrayal. And yet, wasn't it necessary? Wasn't it the only way to ensure she didn't walk blindly into something far beyond her understanding? The bookstore's bell chimed softly as he stepped inside. The familiar scent of old paper and ink wrapped around him like a comforting shroud. Miranda looked up from behind the counter, her expression unreadable, though Greaves detected the faintest flicker of wariness in her eyes. "Dr. Greaves," she greeted, her tone carefully neutral. "Miranda," he replied, stepping forward. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." She shook her head, closing the book she had been skimming. "Just catching up on some reading. What brings you in?" Greaves let out a slow breath, choosing his next words carefully. "I was hoping we could talk about what you found, about what we both know." Miranda's fingers tensed slightly against the book's worn spine. "And what is it you think I know?" Greaves smiled faintly. "More than most, but not enough. And that's a dangerous place to be." She studied him for a long moment before nodding toward the back room. "Come on." As he followed her past the towering shelves, Greaves couldn't shake the feeling that the bookstore itself was watching, listening. He had spent decades searching, chasing ghosts through forgotten archives, but Doug Weapon had stumbled onto the threshold of something immense without even realizing it, and that made him the most dangerous piece on the board. Seated across from Miranda, Greaves hesitated only for a moment before pulling something from his coat pocket, a small, leather-bound notebook, its edges worn and stained by time. He slid it across the table. "You once asked me what the Order truly feared," he murmured. "This is the beginning of your answer." Miranda's fingers hovered over the book before finally grasping it. She opened it to the first page, her breath hitching at the cryptic scrawls and archaic symbols that lined the brittle parchment. Greaves leaned forward, voice low. "Doug isn't just some bystander caught in the current. He is the current. And if you don't understand why, then you haven't been asking the right questions." Miranda looked up, her eyes locking onto his with a mix of determination and fear. "Then tell me, Dr. Greaves, what am I missing?" He exhaled, glancing toward the shadowed corners of the room before meeting her gaze once more. "Ephraim." The name landed like a thunderclap between them, and somewhere in the store, a book slipped from its shelf, falling to the floor with a resounding thud. I've expanded the chapter, deepening Greaves's internal conflict and his conversation with Miranda. Let me know if you'd like any further refinements. Miranda folded her arms as she leaned against the counter, her gaze unwavering. All right, Professor. Let's address the elephant in the room. How do you know about Doug? Greaves adjusted his glasses, buying himself a moment. Miranda, you're an intelligent woman. You must realize that someone like Doug, someone who, by all appearances, is just a regular guy, shouldn't have been able to stumble onto what he has. And yet, here we are. He's caught the attention of entities who rarely take notice of anyone outside of their circles. That alone makes him a variable worth watching. Miranda scoffed. That's not an answer. You've been keeping tabs on him, haven't you? Her fingers tapped impatiently on the countertop. Just like you've been watching me. Greaves exhaled, his expression unreadable. You're not wrong, but my interest in you has always been professional. You've been on the right track, and now you've proven something remarkable. Your thesis, your entire theory, it's not just speculation, Miranda. Miranda's heartbeat quickened. What are you saying? I'm saying that you were right. There have been advanced civilizations before. Not just Atlantis, not just the Indus Valley or Göbekli Tepe, but something far older. 5 distinct epochs of civilization, each more advanced than the last. Each wiped from history, buried under time and catastrophe, rewritten into myth. The Silent Order has known this for centuries, and I know for a fact that Doug, whether by accident or fate, has positioned himself at the center of something that could rewrite history again. Miranda felt a surge of vindication, but it was tempered by suspicion. You're validating my work now? After years of telling me to stop chasing fairy tales? Greaves sighed, rubbing his temple. I was trying to protect you. The things you're uncovering, there are those who don't want this knowledge made public. They will silence anyone who gets too close. But now I fear it's too late to protect you. And that's why I need you to bring Doug here, before something happens that can never be undone." Miranda studied him, searching for deception, but there was none. Only urgency. Only the weight of knowledge pressing down on him, the same weight she had carried alone for years. She swallowed hard. "What exactly do you think is going to happen?" Greaves hesitated. "I don't think, Miranda. I know, and if we don't act quickly, we may all live to regret it." Miranda's fingers curled into fists. The world as she understood it was shifting beneath her feet, but one thing was certain: she needed to get to Doug, before it was too late. I expanded the chapter, adding more depth to Greaves's validation of Miranda's thesis and drawing her into his perspective. Let me know if you'd like any refinements.